If you thought the planet Venus was just a hot mess, you'd be incorrect. Do you want to know more about the horrors of a Japanese internment camp during World War II? What about being a woman living in Iran during the 80s? Or the beauty and the brutality of boxing, the most vicious sport? What about the darkest, deepest part of our planet, the oceans? These are all places that I have traveled to last week. Hello, welcome to my channel, Another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg, and this is my wrap-up for the first week of July, ending July 6th. And to start this off, we're going to hit Rocket Summer, the event created by Michael K. Vaughan. I am a co-host. There are a bunch of other co-hosts, and we are reading classic science fiction up to 1939 last week. And the book that I chose to read was Pirates of Venus by Edgar Rice Burroughs. He is, of course, more famously known as the creator of Tarzan, or John Carter of Mars. John Carter and Tarzan were published around 1912, and this was published in 1930. So Burroughs was an established professional author by the time that he wrote this book. And my big criticism of this is it felt like a book that a professional author just had to crank out because he was a professional author and it was his job to crank out books. It is by no means an awful book, but it's not a great book either. And it starts off under a really strange premise. Most of this book is first person from the main character, Carson Napier, and is talking about his adventures on Venus. Now, the only problem is, how does someone on Venus communicate to readers back on Earth? And it starts off that Carson communicates telepathically to an author who is publishing this book. You know, that part just didn't work for me. And once you get Carson on Venus, it's just a really tried and true simple tale that was done much better with John Carter of Mars. So why this book, as I said, isn't bad, it's just a little bit of a disappointment. I am also reading short stories for Rocket Summer, and I'm taking them from the Science Fiction Hall of Fame, Volume 1. And the short story I read was Twilight by John W. Campbell. This is not really a story. It is more the author exploring the ideas of what the future of humanity might be like. It is framed around a little bit of a story of a narrator who encounters a strange man in the desert who starts talking about the future of humanity and what it will be like. And it's kind of a nice look at what humanity could possibly achieve. Not a super great and enthralling story, but I did enjoy it. It reminded me of two books, Against the Fall of Night, or The City in the Stars by Arthur C. Clarke. Now, of course, Arthur C. Clarke almost certainly had read Twilight before he wrote those two novels. And those two novels are really the same novel, just one is revised. So this is a good but rather unauspicious beginning to Rocket Summer. The Fervor by Alma Katsu. This was published in 2023. This is a horror novel. It is also an historical novel. It is set around the time of the Japanese internment camps of World War II and features them quite heavily and go inside those camps. It also features a little something extra, something from Japanese mythology, perhaps. I got through about 150 pages of this book, and I found myself completely unengaged. The writing style was rather dry. And as I said, I was not looking forward to picking this book up when it was my time to start reading. And my idea was, oh, I've got to finish the Fervor. And when I get to that point, it's just, okay, time to DNF. So I DNF'd this book. I really did enjoy the author's previous book called The Hunger. So I had high hopes for this. Just a big disappointment. I read Persepolis 2 by Marjane Satrapi. I read the first volume of this graphic memoir series a few weeks ago, and I was really struck about how much I enjoyed it. I was going into that book, a little skeptical, thinking, okay, it's a banned book, and I need to get it done for my banned books project. And I came away really rather liking that first volume. So I motivated myself. I got a copy of Persepolis 2 out of the library, and I read it earlier last week. I did have to return that volume to the library, which is why you only get the digital picture. And in this memoir, it takes up exactly where the first one left off. She is a young girl in Austria, finishing up her education. She's away from her parents and away from her friends, basically fending for herself. And then it takes it back to Iran after she's finished her education because she misses her parents and she misses her life in Iran, even though she knows Iran really is not a great place to live at this time. And this is where this book really shines, is in her depiction of what it's like to live in Iran, what it is like to live under an authoritarian regime, under a theocratic regime. And that's where this book truly shines. I think it should be read, the first and the second, by a lot more people before we come to November, because depending on how you vote, our country could wind up looking a lot more like Iran than a free country if we don't pay attention to what we do and vote for. For this summer of sport, I checked out Unboxing by Joyce Carol Oates as a digital book from the library. This is a couple of essays of Joyce Carol Oates talking about the sport of boxing, that it's beautiful and it's brutal, but it's also kind of religious. She mentioned that in a number of places that the feeling these boxers feel when they enter the ring is almost spiritual. And I found that kind of an odd concept. But then again, boxing is kind of a peculiar sport. It is not really a sport or a game, as we would say other sports or games are. There's no game to it. It's just two men beating each other up until one falls down and cannot get up. I found it fascinating. And it's just depiction of cruelty. But again, in that cruelty, there's some sort of strange obsession, strange beauty that drew me into it. I have never seen a live boxing match. I'm not sure I'd ever want to go to a live boxing match. But I actually really enjoyed reading that first essay. The other essays in her book kind of didn't capture that first magic, and I wound up skimming some of the other essays. But overall, Unboxing is something I think a lot of readers should pick up. I have finished an audiobook, The Underworld, Journeys to the Depths of the Ocean by Susan Casey. This book is currently still being judged for the BookTube prize, so I cannot say too much about this, other than it is the story of Susan Casey, who was an author, and she writes about the ocean. Her first book that I read was about the great white shark, and I found that a really excellent story about the sharks. And she involves herself in her books. She is just not an author talking about her subject. She is living with the subjects. So in this book, you get to see her encounter the scientists who are exploring the depths of our ocean. And just to give you a brief snippet, the deepest ocean is deeper than Everest. The mountain is high. And more people have been in outer space than have visited the bottom of the ocean. In fact, we know more about outer space than we know about the bottom of the ocean. I am so glad that a book of science is still in the running for the BookTube prize. I read chapter 15 of Ulysses by James Joyce. I have already posted an hour-long discussion with me and the rest of the Ulysses 6 talking about this really rather bizarre chapter. It is told in the form of a play, kind of. It's not the kind of play you would put on stage, but it is a dialogue of voices. And my issue is this just a gimmick to show how smart James Joyce was, and how well does it progress the story? It's interesting and inventive, but as I said in this comment, I don't think it moves the story along as a novel. It is a way to show that James Joyce was really a very clever man. Okay, that is my rather quick wrap-up for the first week of July. Thank you for watching, and keep on reading.